Happy Friday and welcome to Try This at Work. Just to get started, I need to talk about a few housekeeping items. So again, this is a Microsoft live event. Something to note is that we are not in any way, shape, or form capturing your data. For those of you that may have authenticated through Office 365, we may have your email address. But in no way, shape, or form are we accessing, repurposing, or distributing that information in any way. Security is of the utmost importance to us, and we will not be leveraging that data. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So really excited to continue our three-part September series. Today, we're going to be talking about voice, what you need to know, part 2. So Scott's going to continue on with that discussion. Again, we will be having live Q&A, so please don't hesitate to start submitting your questions, and we're happy to answer those throughout the presentation. As always, these sessions are posted on demand, so for anyone that may need to go back and revisit or suddenly gets pulled out, please know that you can visit the TryThisAt.Work website, and you will be able to access the recordings on demand. And please do take a look at all the past recordings as well. We have some really great ones out there. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Scott.
Hey, Kelly, thanks. And hey, everybody, glad to be back here for part 2 of Voice, What You Need to Know. Let's dive right into this. So this week, we're going to talk about clients and devices. As promised, we're going to talk about direct routing. We're getting into some licensing, talk about this ever elusive licensing model and how we take care of all of this. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with Q&A. So when we think about Microsoft Teams and we think about the journey that we've been on with our unified communications platform, and I'm talking about going all the way back to the LCS, OCS, Link, and Skype for Business days, clients were always a big deal. Even with Skype for Business, for those of you that are listening probably are thinking, yeah, well, the Mac client wasn't all that great. Well, that's a true statement. Skype for Business did have some challenges when it came to the Mac client, but with Teams being built from the ground up, the one thing that they did and one thing they emphasized when they built Teams was they wanted a consistent interface across all devices for the Teams UI, and I think they really hit this one on the head. I think they really hit this one out of the park. So with that, let's talk about the different kinds of devices that we can have, or clients and devices. Of course, we've got our desktop client, which is what we're all familiar with, right? Mac or, well, we'll get into that. We've got mobile clients, right? Our phones. We've got web clients, the different types of browsers that we deal with. And then we've got physical devices, things like headsets, speakerphones, webcams, IP phones, displays, team rooms, collaboration bars. So a myriad of hardware that will work with Teams as well. So let's dive right into that. Now here's a little word cloud that kind of gives you an idea of all the different desktop clients we support. Of course, Windows, as we are Microsoft, Mac, okay, which everybody, pretty much knows, even from the Skype for Business days. But, here's one that you might not be too clear about, and that is Linux. Okay, so we just recently released our Linux version of Teams. So Debian, Red Hat, Ubuntu, to name a few. Okay, so for those of you folks that are still dealing with Linux from a day-to-day basis, you can have a Teams client and stay connected and collaborated with your coworkers. And of course, for more information, you see the links there in the bottom right-hand corner. Feel free to look those up at your leisure. So that pretty much rounds out our desktop clients. From a mobile client standpoint, well, we really kind of only have two options, don't we? It's Android or iOS, so iPhone or Android. And the nice thing is having had both, or have both, that experience is very, very similar. So with your Teams desktop client, you have a left rail, and with your mobile client, the rail is on the bottom, so it's a bottom rail. But for the most part, the experience is the same. And unlike Skype for Business, where if you were in a conversation on your desktop client and you wanted to move to your mobile client, you had to initiate a new conversation. The client chat experience when moving from desktop to mobile is seamless. As a matter of fact, if you had them side by side, you could be alternately answering from your mobile client or from your desktop client, and the messages will show up in both places. So it is a more seamless more seamless user interface, and that was a big ask, and we heard you guys loud and clear. Okay, and again, you can find your current versions on the link or in the what is it, the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. So look for those. Look for those mobile clients if you have the opportunity, and it's a great experience. It really is, and all the way into meetings. I'm just gonna, before I go on, yeah, the meeting experience in mobile is absolutely amazing. Seamlessly transferring from Wi-Fi to mobile cellular or cellular data, even right in the middle of a meeting. It's really cool. Now then, from a web client standpoint, we have two fully supported browsers, which means if you log into Teams using the Microsoft new Chromium-based Edge browser, you will get a full client experience very similar to that of which you get in the actual desktop application. The only difference being you'll have a the address bar across the top with the address and HTTP /teams.microsoft.com address you'll see. And then, of course, Chrome, the latest 2 versions. And then we do support, to a limited sense, some of these other browsers that I have listed. And, of course, you can go to that link to find out information on those.
Hey, Scott, I have a question.
Sure.
That came in.
Yep.
So can you give an example of a downgraded feature, saying limited features there?
Sure. So when we talk about fully supported, we're talking about audio, video, screen sharing, file sharing, things like that. So depending on the client or the browser, you might not have things like the ability to share your screen or maybe the ability to chat or something like that. And it kind of varies across those different browsers. So again, if you're very interested in what's not supported because your favorite browser is listed in the limited feature section, click that link and it'll show you the things that you cannot do. And so to set your expectations should you have to get into a meeting. But that would be something that would be considered a limitation.
Perfect, thank you.
Now then, for devices that are connected to Teams, here again we have our word cloud. These are the names of manufacturers or partners that have either headphones, speakerphones, webcams that connect and are Teams qualified or /certified. Now, when we talk about Teams certified or Teams qualified, that means that they have been put through the process of the checklist at Microsoft that says, yes, that certain things are accomplished. For example, headsets. All Teams qualified headsets have to have noise canceling microphones. And what I mean by noise canceling microphone is it has to have the ability to isolate external noise from the speaker's voice. And typically the way that happens is there's multiple microphones. There'll be one pointed at your mouth, so it can hear you specifically, and there might be as many as 4 facing outward, capturing noise from outside of your voice, so that it can then cancel it out. So you could be in a very noisy area and still hear that person clearly. Now, one of the things that's not a qualifier, but you're going to find in headsets is the ability to have the earpiece have noise canceling as well, which means it drowns out the noise that's around you. So you'll find, say, Sennheiser or Plantronics or even Bose, even Microsoft now have these big over-the-ear headphones, and they have noise cancellation in them that drowns out the noise that's around you, whether it be, so maybe you wear them on an airplane and it drowns out the airplane noise, or you're in a noisy office and it drowns out other people or even the air conditioning system, things like that, things that can be really annoying.
Or Scott, let's be honest, or if you have kids in the background right now, speaking of today, it'll help drown out that noise as well.
Oh my gosh, my local newscaster, the meteorologist needs that because her kids are constantly screaming on every newscast when she's there. She should really invest in one of those. So yeah, great point. So from a headset standpoint, these are the companies that you can purchase Teams qualified headsets from a speakerphone standpoint. Those little pucks that you see, the little round speakerphones, like I'm on right now. I happen to be talking to you on a Jabra 710. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's actually outside my closed window, sounds like somebody's trimming the hedges or something. So Yealink, Poly, Jabra, and EPOS. Now, EPOS might be a new name to you. That is formerly Sennheiser. Now, Sennheiser still exists, but that part of the company deals with professional audio, where EPOS has gone into the business audio section. So if you start seeing the name EPOS around, that is the old Sennheiser folks that have the Teams qualified devices. And then, of course, from a webcam standpoint, everybody knows Logitech, but you might not have known that both Yealink, Jabra, Poly, Hovey, and Aver also have Teams qualified webcams, and that's amazing. So we're really, really happy to be in partnership with them. And again, the link at the bottom talks about USB connected devices. So lots of possibilities here. And of course, in this ongoing COVID world that we live in, these things are rolling off the shelves because everybody's working from home and everybody's looking for that best in case experience rather than using their speaker and microphone on the laptop, which generally are not qualified devices. Now, for those of us that like to have a device on your desk, a phone, okay, or for those of us that will be going back to work and have to have a phone on our desk, whether it be for muscle memory, just because you like to pick up the handset, or just because it's a requirement or what have you, we do have Teams capable or Teams qualified IP phones, Teams phones, okay, and here's a list of them, okay, as well as what are called this new thing that they're coming out with called Teams displays. So what it basically is, the form factor is about the same size as a phone. So here you can see, here's a Teams display right here. So this might be something you'd set on your desk. It's got a webcam in it. It's got a microphone. It's got speaker. You're probably not going to present from it, but the idea is you can have your video conferences right from your desk with these Teams displays. And then, of course, your standard phones. Because the way the phones differ from the display is phones don't have cameras, okay? And if you're in a meeting, you're going to be in a meeting audio only. So these Teams displays give you a more full featured meeting environment so if somebody's screen sharing, you can see it. If people are presenting video, you can see it. Even though it looks kind of like a phone without a handset, it's a Teams display so that you can have your meetings. Pretty cool. And again, the link down at the bottom if you want to check that out.
Yeah, hey Scott, another question here. I heard a rumor that Microsoft is supporting old devices again. Can you confirm?
You know, that's a great lead in to my next slide. So yes, many of you may have heard that Teams is going to continue to support the older Skype for Business and or what are called 3PIP, right? Third-party IP phones and certain SIP phones going forward. Now we just announced this, so it's kind of new. Very, very exciting though. So I've got two links there. One is from Tom Arbuthnot from Modality. He's got a blog that he talks about it, and of course our own Microsoft blog. It's kind of hard to find in the blog, so I've actually copied and pasted the part of the paragraph where it actually talks about that. So here you've got this whole blog page, and you've got just these few sentences talking about something so huge. We've had people asking about this for a long time. Why don't you continue to support these phones and things like that? Now, the important thing to understand about these Skype for Business phones or certain types of SIP phones is it's not going to be a fully functional Teams device, but it will give you core calling features. So, make and receive calls, transfer calls, put calls on hold, park, pick up, things like that. But, this was a big, huge ask because we transitioned from Skype for Business to Teams so quickly. People are like, we just bought these phones. We don't want to go throwing them out. We want to be able to use them in Teams. So it was a huge ask. Again, Microsoft listened. We pivoted. We were able to bring them back, and we'll be able to support those types moving forward. Again, in a limited sense. So let's be clear. They're not Teams phones, okay? But they will connect to Teams through a gateway that's in the cloud so that you can have calling features.
That's awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm very excited about that. Now, we've heard a lot about meetings as of late, right? We've got competitors that are out there. I'm not going to name them, but we all know who they are. They have, you see their names on the TV all the time. And from a meeting standpoint, you know, they could be in a conference room, or they might be you know, in their home, you know, for example, possibly. But as we transition back to work, you know, we're going to get back into the swing of having meetings, people in the conference room, maybe at a reduced amount. But those meeting rooms are still going to be there, and we're still going to want to use them. We're still going to want to get people together and be able to be collaborative with people in another facility and things like that. Well, that's where these Microsoft Teams rooms, or MTRs, come into play. And of course, you can see the manufacturers, those that make MTRs, so Logitech and Poly, or the former Plantronics and Polycom combination, Yealink, Crestron, HP, Lenovo, all make MTRs, or Microsoft Teams rooms. Now, what it is a Teams client, generally an external webcam microphone, something that ties into your existing audio or video infrastructure in a conference room. So many of you may have a Crestron controller in your conference room, something that's controlling the maybe the drop-down screens or the lighting or things like that. Crestron, being a Microsoft Teams room manufacturer, can integrate those together so you have an entirely Crestron-controlled Microsoft Teams room. You know, something that's very mentionable about having Teams rooms is the ability to be discovered. So these Teams rooms actually show up in Active Directory. They use a thing called Bluetooth beaconing. So if you happen to be walking by one of these rooms with your mobile phone, and you happen to have the Teams client loaded on your mobile and Bluetooth enabled, you might actually get a message saying, hey, this room is available. Would you like to hold your meeting in there? Show up on your mobile and have the ability to transfer that call right to that Teams room. So really, really cool features. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this. The ability to transfer calls to a Teams room or invite a Teams room, things like that. And of course, once you're in the room, the ability to share both from your device in the meeting or through the Teams room's device is amazing. Plus, the ability of devices in the rooms to know that they're in the same meeting in proximity, and limit the amount of that feedback, that echo, when you forget to mute your microphone. So all really, really neat features that are built into the Teams rooms and the client itself to interact to reduce the amount of problems you would have either in joining or even during the meeting with the echo and things like that. So some really cool stuff. Not to mention, not only do we have the ability to control and monitor our Teams rooms from the Microsoft Teams admin dashboard, but we also have what's called a managed rooms service. So you could actually have a partner or Microsoft manage your Microsoft Teams rooms for you, you know, in the event that you didn't want to take care of that yourself. And I see a question come up. Let me just read this real quick. Does Crestron UC support dual screen video having remote project? So dual screen is coming. It's not there yet, but I know it's on the roadmap for all of the Microsoft Teams rooms, but I don't believe that it is there just yet. Thank you for that question. Now, you know, we talk about the conference room, and those are generally larger conference rooms, but what about our smaller rooms, our huddle rooms, our phone rooms, things like that? Well, we have these things called collaboration bars. Okay, and as you can see there, Poly's got one, Yealink's got one, I don't know why I didn't put Logitech there. Logitech actually has one as well. They're just smaller self-contained units, so it's a microphone, speaker, and a camera. Might be USB controlled, or possibly could be out there on the network like a Microsoft Teams room, and we call those collaboration bars. And currently, Poly and Yealink have the known quote-unquote collaboration bars, where Logitech does have the Meetup, which is technically a USB device. And again, the link down there at the bottom. All right, let's switch gears away from devices. And as I promised, let's talk about direct routing. Now, last week, we talked just briefly about direct routing. We talked more about calling plans. So you might remember this slide. This is the exact same slide from last week, right? Showing you where we currently have calling plans and some of the new places that are coming in literally just a couple of weeks. But the purpose of this talk today is to talk about direct routing. So all the places where there's not a pin, okay, or an orange little dot, you can use what is called direct routing. Now, technically, you can use direct routing in the areas we cover as well. Obviously, we would rather use calling plans, but if your needs, your telephony needs are such that you want to keep your carrier, then you can do that with what's called direct routing. So what exactly is direct routing? Well, as the graphic shows, direct routing allows you to keep your current PSTN provider. Now, there's that acronym from last week we talked about, Public Switch Telephony Network or Telephone Network. That's the phone company. That's the CLEC. There's another term from last week. That is who is currently providing your phone lines and phone numbers today. Okay, so you don't have to buy them from Microsoft. You don't have to get your phone numbers from Microsoft. You can keep your existing phone numbers and your existing lines. Now, why would you do that? Well, you would do that in a case where Microsoft doesn't offer phone numbers in an area, or you might actually do it because your rates are so astronomically good that you couldn't imagine going anywhere else, or if you own stock in your provider or something like that. Just a little joke, sorry. But anyway, it allows you to take your phone lines and phone numbers and connect them to Office 365. All right, so you have your Teams client, or you might have any of the devices that we talked about as your calling device, but you're using phone numbers that you've always had with the carrier that you still have. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Here's your phone system provider. Here's your telephone lines, whether that be a T1, E1, PRI, or even SIP trunking. Okay, and that's going to connect to the device that makes it all happen, a session border controller, or an SP, what we call an SBC. Now, there's a link here, that's why it's underlined in blue, that will take you to Microsoft and give you a list of qualified SBCs for this. But basically what happens is we connect your phone lines to the SBC, and then the SBC connects to Office 365 or the Cloud PBX via SIP trunking, and only SIP trunking. So no matter what your circuit is here between your PSTN provider and the session border controller, it's going to be only SIP trunking between your session border controller and Office 365. Okay. Now, the other benefit to direct routing is from a standpoint of what it gives you is you get to keep your trunks, but you can also integrate things like your existing PBX, maybe some analog lines or analog telephony adapters for fax machines, or elevator phones, or maybe a factory floor phone, something like that. Possibly a call center integration, or any kind of third-party application that you might have created. All right. That session border controller then allows that interface between your client, you as a client, as a Teams user, and those things. So let's say, for example, a Teams user needs to call somebody on an existing PBX because they're not in the cloud for whatever reason. An SBC using direct routing can make that happen. So the call would go from the Teams user back down that SIP trunk into the border controller. The border controller would analyze the number dialed and recognize that as, hey, I've got to send that call to my PBX, and then the call would terminate there. So it's no on-net calling there. It's just a SIP call to a PBX line. That's a huge advantage, especially if you're in a migration standpoint. So let's say your phone system, your office phone system, your office PBX is old and you're looking to get rid of it. You might institute direct routing in that transition period while you're migrating people from this PBX to Office 365. So it offers you a migration path. Or one of the biggest complaints I've heard is the fact that, in a Skype for Business, you could have analog lines off of Skype for Business, but we don't allow that in Teams. So the only way to do this in Teams is to have that session border controller connected to analog telephony adapters. That way, folks in Teams that need access to those analog devices, whether it be fax machines, or factory phones, elevator phones, or whatnot, still can connect to them via the session border controller. So huge advantage there. So just to recap, the benefits of direct routing: keeping your own trunks, keeping your carrier, the ability to integrate with your PBX or any analog lines, any third-party voice apps or what have you, and the ability for your Teams users to then also call back and forth between those devices. And of course, they can make outbound calls as well. That's the whole idea. Is a Teams user with direct routing could place an outbound call. But your session border controller becomes that traffic cop. It becomes that voice firewall, if you will. Okay, so good stuff with direct routing. So we've got you covered in both sense. So even if we don't we being Microsoft, don't offer phone service in that area, you can still move to Teams, still have voice, still use your phone numbers, and still integrate all your apps and devices. Really, really cool stuff. All right. That's direct routing at a high level. Of course, there's lots of technical things that go with that. But moving right along, from a licensing standpoint, what do you need in order to get all of this stuff to work, whether it be calling plan or direct routing? Well, easiest way to do this is with an E5 license, okay, included in E5, okay? So you get all these things. You get phone system, you get audio conferencing. We're not here to talk about audio conferencing, but it's there in E5. And these are the things you get. And then, of course, if you add a calling plan, then you can do things like E911. You can manage your phone number assignment. Of course, you get unlimited inbound calls. And of course, outbound calling is based on your calling plan like we talked about last week. Now, audio conferencing and phone system are available as standalone SKUs. So if you don't have an E5 license, say you have an E1 or an E3, F1, F3, you can buy the phone system and or audio conferencing licenses a la carte. And then you can either add on a calling plan or you can add direct routing to attach your phone lines to that phone system. And again, as Kelly asked me last week, who do you talk to if you need any more information about this? Make sure you reach out to your account team or your team's technical specialist or your specialist, possibly your TAM or CSAM. Basically, anybody on your account side can help you decipher all of this. Now, I know we went through a lot of stuff, so I'm just going to pause and see if we have any questions before moving on, because we're just about at time.
It's like no questions coming in, Scott, so I think we go ahead and wrap up early.
I think I baffled them. Well, anyway.
It was very detailed.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. I understand, a lot of stuff. You might want to just, go back to on demand and consume some of this. Of course, you can reach out to Kelly and I or your Microsoft people. But, this was part 2. So we are just 2/3 of the way through our series. And so here's a teaser. Next week, we are going to be taking you through the Teams administration portal. Okay, and we're going to do a walkthrough of it. So you're going to be able to see all the things that you can control from an administrative perspective. And that's, so when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about from a company level or a tenant level, creating policies and things like that. We're going to walk you through that and demystify that, show you some of the reports that you can get, and show you some of the controls and how all that stuff works. It's going to be a lot for 30 minutes, but it's, the nice thing is it's recorded, so you can always go back and re-consume it. So thanks again for joining. Hashtag TryThisAt.Work, and don't forget to tell your friends to go to www.TryThisAt.Work for more and more exciting technical and business-based Teams sessions in the near future. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.